All right, unless you're Aaron Gwyn, you ain't getting very far without the chain. It's obviously the bit that joins the cranks to the rear wheel. It's actually really crucial to get the right length, especially in this world of 12-speed drivetrains, full suspension bikes, and occasionally high pivots as well. So today we're going to talk everything you need to know about chain length. All right, so today we're going to look at the anatomy of a chain, why you might be changing your chain, and then how to make sure that you get the length of the chain right, and why it's important too. Now, if you want to see how we do it with Shimano, SRAM or Transmission, there are chapters down below, so skip forward if you're not interested in the how and why. All right, so this is a bit of bicycle chain, and this is what it's made out of. So the outer plate's pretty obvious. It's the ones at the widest part of the chain. Quite often these will have a little logo on there, so it says Shimano, and sometimes they'll have an arrow on there, and that's to indicate which way round they go. That's quite important for shifting. It's how it sort of keys into the tooth profiles on your cassette. So if it's got an arrow on there, follow it. Then we've got the inner links. Those are the two sort of little narrow ones. Again, occasionally they're a bit more basic than the outer ones, but they're important, obviously. And then you've got your pin, and your bushing and your roller on the inside. So this is what sits over the teeth and helps it roll on and off. When you get chain wear, like when it stretches, which might be a reason why you're swapping your chain, it's actually sort of the whole internals of this that kind of degrade a little bit, I guess. And when you're lubing a chain, that's where the lube needs to go, down in there. It doesn't need to go on the outside of the plate. Doesn't make any difference there. The mountain bike world is known for having too many standards, but there is one standard that seems to have transgressed the entire history of cycling and road, gravel, mountain bikes, and that is the length or the distance between two pins. So this pin to that pin, one pair of links, is 1 inch. Finally, you've got your chain, but then you've also got either like a power link type system or connector link, or a little pin. And these are to join your chain together when you're connecting it all into one piece.
Why does it matter? Why is chain length so important?
Chain length might not seem that important, but it is really important to get your drivetrain working as it should and to not cause damage. If your chain is too short, you're going to end up with a mech that's really stretched, and potentially that's going to damage things. And again, if it's too short, you might struggle to get into the biggest sprocket simply because the chain isn't long enough to accommodate the chain ring, the biggest sprocket, the derailleur, and the stretch. If the chain is too long, then you're going to end up with like a lot of chain slap potentially, and you end up with sort of like less accurate shifting. It's better to be too long than too short, but ideally have it the right length. And when it comes to SRAM's transmission group sets, so whether that's S1000, GX, XO, XXXXL, and the new mechanical ones, then the chain length helps dictate the distance between the jockey wheel and the cassette. And if you get that wrong, the shifting goes to pot. So it is really important.
Even if you're just a few links out? Like
yeah,
one or two?
like we're talking, you know, when we sort of talk about how to set the right chain length, we are talking 1 or 2 links at a time. It's actually quite easy to get the right chain length, you just got to follow the process, so we'll talk through that in a minute. Let's talk about getting the right chain length if you are just replacing your chain. This is the easiest thing to do. You're going to take the chain off the bike, and let's say for argument's sake, you've taken it off, and here's another one of my old chains from my, my own garage at home. And let's just assume that this chain was the correct length. If you've bought a bike from a manufacturer, the chain will be the right length, unless they're real cowboys, but the chain's going to be the right length. If you've had a bike that's been running for a couple of years or a year and you know the shifting's been great, you've probably got the chain the right length, okay? So what we're going to do is take it off and then simply count, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to somewhere in the region of 112 to 120, probably. Count it. I usually count 3 times because when I've done this in the past, it turns out I'm not very good at counting. Just remember though, that you are either going to have a pair of inner links at the end, or one where you've got an inner and an outer at the end. And that's going to dictate whether you use a connecting pin or a quick link. The connecting pin or the quick link will be included with your new chain, and they shouldn't be reused, but everyone does. Next up, a little brew. Anyone who doesn't have a cup of tea or a beer when they're fixing their bike is a wrong 'un.
You didn't make one for me then?
You're filming, not fixing bikes.
Oh, okay.
Different job.
Fine.
All right, so next up, we're going to do how to set your chain length for Shimano and for SRAM, and also for SRAM Transmission, because although it's very similar, it's actually a little bit different in how they describe to do it. We're also going to talk about the difference between full suspension bikes and hardtails, because again, there's a little bit of a difference. So this is where I'm going to take the chain off this bike, and we'll start from the start.
So what are you looking for? Are you looking for the quick link?
Yeah, so this bike has a quick link on here. So it's basically a pair of outer plates that squeeze together and pop the system. Using a tool is so much easier. Everyone's always like, yeah, I can do it with my fingers. All right, great, well done. I can't. Tools are made for a reason. So get your quick link pliers. These are really useful, nice things to have. Take the tension out of the mech. Squeeze, and is it gonna go? Come on.
There it goes.
There we go. I'll take that off there. I'm going to use, for the process of this video, old chains from my garage. They're not necessarily like beautiful condition. It's fine. It's just a demonstration. So we'll talk about SRAM in a minute, but if you are setting the chain length for a Shimano drivetrain bike, this is how you do it. All right then. So we've got our chain. Let's assume that this is a box fresh chain. It very much isn't, but it's fine. What we do is this. Get one end of the chain, route it through the seat stay as you would, and plop it onto the top of your cassette, over the chain ring. There we go. And then, so a quick hack here, I've got the rear brake clamped on so that the wheel doesn't roll forward. Smart. Then we're going to pull the chain underneath and wrap it, ignore the derailleur, wrap it onto the cassette and bring it up here, okay? So, ignore that. There's going to be a bit of flop in here because that's just how chain stays lengths work, but don't worry. Get it as tight as you can. Don't have it like really baggy. Obviously pull it to its tightest thing. And then you've got here is what they call 0.0 on the cassette, okay? So that's where the two ends of the chain kind of meet on the sprocket. And this 0.0 is from where you start counting. Now, how many links of the chain you then count to give you a proper chain length is dependent on whether you're running a full suspension or a hardtail, and whether you're using a connecting pin or a quick link. Now, there will be a table from Shimano that we will put on screen, and in a minute I'll tell you when to pause, because if you're going, if you're doing a live fitting, you're going to need to know that. But basically, you look at the setup you have. Is this last link on the cassette an inner or an outer? Are you full suspension? Are you hardtail? Are you using the plates, the connector quick link, or the pin? And then you count up here, and that, however many you need, according to the table, will tell you where to snap the chain, basically, or where to separate the chain. So, this is full suspension. I've got an in and an out. So, according to this, in, out, using a quick link, that's how I will be joining this chain. It says I need 5 links plus the quick link. So I'm going to count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is where I would separate or break the chain, leaving me with 2 inners that I would then connect with my power link. Now obviously if I was using a pin, I would want it to be an in and then to finish on an out. So I would have an extra link in there. Instead of counting 5, I'd count 6. For hardtails, I think you count a pair less, basically, because full suspension bikes, when the suspension compresses, sometimes the distance between the rear axle and the cranks, the chainstay length, increases as the wheel goes through its suspension, depending on where the main pivot is, whether it's VPP, whether it's high pivot.
I see, so you need that extra leeway then.
So Shimano say, you need that extra leeway.
Okay.
Okay? So that's what I'd do, and then I'd join, split the chain in the right place, rejoin it, route it through the mech in the correct fashion. Job's a good one. The table is coming up now. Right, let's move on to SRAM. I don't know if you know, I actually went to the gym recently.
Oh yeah?
That's why I'm so strong.
I can tell.
SRAM Transmission group sets. This is really easy. This is probably like one of the best things that any company has ever done in terms of helping you get your bike working properly. Right, transmission, if you didn't know, doesn't have high and low, and it doesn't have the B tension screw. The derailleur mounts directly to the frame, and its position is crucial for shifting performance, and part of that position is reliant on the length of the chain. So get the chain length wrong with transmission, you will not have the shifting that it could have. In fact, it just won't work properly at all. Fortunately, SRAM have made a really good app, and it's really useful. So bring up your app for this SRAM Access app, or obviously it's on the internet, and you're looking for the full mount chain length guide. Google this. If you don't have the app, you'll be able to find it on the internet. It's the same process on your web browser. Open this up. Bike type. Well, it's obviously a mountain bike. Bike brand. Let's find last in the list. Hey.
Nice.
Okay, so this is a Glen MX, because I'm running the mullet wheels, 2003. Frame size, mine's a 185. Chainring size, 32 teeth. Calculate. Does it for you? Look. So you need all this information anyway for setting your gears with transmission. Setup key A, setup cog 24, which is number 6. Chainring, and then look, chain length, 116. So basically, if you're in transmission, you want to know how long your chain is, just go to the app, find out, count it, fit it, done. We've got to do SRAM mechanical next, which will also account for SRAM access non-transmission. So if you've got a derailleur hanger and you bolt your mech to the derailleur hanger rather than to the frame.
I've got one of those.
This is going to be for you. Great. Any non-SRAM transmission, basically. Gotcha. Little old spec e-bike here. But this has got mechanical SRAM on it, so again, the process is slightly different. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if your frame is in that transmission list, but you are running the older style stuff, probably pretty damn accurate as well. But let's do it properly, because you should always do things properly.
Nice.
It's an SL, isn't it?
In the past, I believe I've taken an old knacker chain off and just laid it on the ground and put a new one up against it. What's to stop you from doing that necessarily? There's
not much to stop you doing that, and it's something we've probably all done, but if a representative from a drivetrain company were here, they would tell us off for doing that, because it's not the best way of doing things. Partly because you kind of got to make sure that your chains are actually lined up. If you do it on the floor and you're sort of like rubbing your finger along and sort of straighten them out, they can sort of kink and bubble and not be quite in the right place, and it can be a bit annoying. And also, obviously, if a chain just stretched, then it might give you slightly inaccurate reading. I would suggest that your chain would have to stretch an awful lot to give you a very wrong reading. It's a quick way of doing it. It's not necessarily the most accurate way of doing it, and I would probably just err on the side of counting, just to like be triply sure if you're a little bit unsure yourself. So SRAM, different process from Shimano, but similar. Same, but different, unless you're doing transmission. So once again, we've got a box fresh SRAM chain, which I will be routing through. And again, the process is different for hardtails, or the counts is different for hardtails as it is from full suspension bikes. So with SRAM, let's assume this is a hardtail. It's not a hardtail, but let's assume it's a hardtail. We're going to put the chain over the chainring, over the biggest sprocket on the cassette again, bringing them up together, and we sort of find out where they meet down here, okay? So about there, all right? Then for a hardtail, add 2 outer and 2 inner links to the length of your chain. So basically 4 count, 1, 2, 3, 4. Break the chain here, and then connect it with a power link, okay? And that is basically how long your chain's going to be on a hardtail, okay? Really simple. Do the overlap, find out where it is, and add 4 links. But obviously end with an inner and an inner. Full sus, slightly different. I'm going to take the bike off the stand and start again.
So why did we need to put this one on the floor? Okay,
so with the Shimano example, there was a difference between hardtails and full susses, and it was make the chain slightly longer on a full sus than a hardtail. And that's because when you compress a full suspension, sometimes the rear chainstay length increases. With SRAM, the way they say to do it is we're going to take the air out of the shock, compress the suspension to the point in its suspension travel where the chainstay is at its longest. So that isn't necessarily at full travel, it will depend on the bike. High pivots, for example, will have a longest chainstay position, maybe potentially earlier in its stroke than later on. But yeah, so I'm going to take the air out, compress the suspension, lengthen those chainstays, and then do the measurements. Now, when you're doing this on your own bike, unless you love setting sag every single time, and if you do, there's a link to a video on how to set your sag solo, just up in the top corner, if Max remembers to put it in. Remember how much pressure is in your shock, because otherwise you'll have to start afresh. So this one has got 215 PSI now. But let's get this.
Seems like an awful lot.
I don't know who last rode the bike. Suspension pressure isn't, it's the same on every different bike. So that'll depend on leverage ratios and shock stroke lengths and your weight. So some shocks will have like 250, 280 PSI, some might have 190 for the same person. So cool. Don't judge.
All right. But right now you're putting in 0 PSI.
I'm going to take I'm going to take it out just so that
it needs to be fully compressed, right?
Yeah, it needs to be compressed, and obviously I need to unlock the shock. So as you can see, when you squash the bike, the distance from the rear axle to the bottom bracket, this is chainstay length on your geometry chart, or your rear centre. This actually changes a little bit. So it's probably about here. And you're going to find, you're going to need to find a way that you can sort of keep it in that position. But let's just say it's here. So we've got the bike sagged, we've got the chainstays as long as they're going to be. We're going to do the same process again, bring the chains together over the chainring and the rear sprocket, find out where they meet. And this is actually, I think it's a different point to what it was when the bike was in the stand, when it's pretending to be a hardtail. And now with a full sus, so long as you've got it stretched as far as it will go, SRAM say add 1 inner and 1 outer link. So basically add 2 links, and again ending on that inner and inner. So that'll give you an impression as to where the chain needs to be snapped.
So that's that then, is it?
Pretty much, that's like the nuts and bolts of it. Obviously the Shimano one is different to the SRAM one, different to the transmission one, so there is a few things to note though. When we are routing the chain over the chainring and the sprocket, if you've got a high pivot bike with an idler, so if it's like Forbidden Druid, for example, the chain goes up and over the idler, route the chain over the idler and the chainring and the sprocket. Don't ignore the idler, basically. If you've got an oval chainring, then you want to clock your cranks to that 1 o'clock position, just to ensure that the chain is almost going over its longest length possible. Some will say that the chain length doesn't change, it doesn't in a way, but basically clock it a little bit. Don't have your cranks like vertical or horizontal, have it about 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock. If you sort of like, when you're measuring your chain and it's coming in kind of in between 2 different lengths and you're not sure whether to go longer or shorter, err on the side of long. 1, because if your chain is too short, you're not going to get into that bigger sprocket and you might damage your derailleur. If it's too long, it might just rattle a little bit more and your shifting might not be perfect. But of course, if it's too long, you can go shorter. But what you shouldn't ever really do is reuse pins. So once you've chopped a chain, it's quite difficult to make it long again. So if it's too long, you can shorten it. If it's too short, you can't easily lengthen it. So I'm going to show you why you shouldn't reuse pins. I'm going to sacrifice my box fresh chain for you. So this is a chain braking tool. This is a moderately fancy one. It's got a few places to hold the chain links in place. Some of them won't have this extension. Nice big levers. This just say 12 to 9 speed only. So if you've got a slightly older chain breaker, it might not work particularly well with a 12-speed chain. It will still work. Might just have to be a bit more careful with it. But yeah, this is quite a nice one. Anyway, let's break a chain. So I'm going to break the chain on this link here. So I've got the chain loaded into the chain breaker. The bigger the chain breaker, the more leverage you've got, and then you're going to start twisting this. When you've got it tight, nice and taut, Make sure that the chain is sat in the teeth nice and straight, because if it's bent, it's not going to be nice. And check that the pin is central. The pin on the tool is central over the pin in the chain, okay? So it's pushing straight. And then you're gonna go, right? That little snap is, you see that little ring there?
Yeah.
So the way the pins in the chain work is they're kind of like rivets. So when they sort of put the chain pin through the chain links, it squashes the end of it to keep everything nice and secure so the chain doesn't blow apart, right? But what I've done there is break the rivet. So that little ring is the end of the rivet. So that's why you shouldn't be reusing pins particularly. Just not good practice. So continue pushing out. Now, if you're really pro, push it out, and then you've got a pin left here, and you can just like wiggle it out. Now, what I've done is rookie. I've left the pin in the long bit of the chain. Now, back in the day, this is kind of what you used to do, and then you would actually reuse that pin, like I just said you shouldn't do, and use that pin, push it back through with the tool, connect your chain up, and you've just introduced a slightly weak link. This is why we have connector pins or quick links. So that's how you sort of snap a chain. Obviously, if I was reusing this chain, I would be removing that link, that little pin from the link, because it shouldn't be in there. You've found out how long your chain needs to be on Shimano, SRAM and Transmission. You've got the chain the right length. Let's assume this is the right length for this bike. Might not be. And we need to reconnect it all together again, okay? So we're gonna show the two different ways that we're gonna do this. One with a connector pin first, and then I'll show you how to do it with a power link or quick link. So, always easier to have the mech in the smallest sprocket. With a SRAM mech, always really nice because you can sort of pull it forward, remove all that tension. With Shimano, you're going to be using your hands a little bit. Or use a bit of string or a zip tie, and you can put a little bit through the cage and tie it onto there. It's a little bit Heath Robinson, but it just brings the tension out of the way. So, right, job one. So, because on this chain, I have an outer at one end and an inner at the other end, I'm going to be using a connector pin. Most people, most of the time these days in 2025, you will be using a power link, but let's do connector pins just in case. So route the chain as you should, through the mech, over the top of the sprocket, over the top of the top jockey, between the top jockey and the little thing through the cage, and then underneath there. We've all got this wrong at one point, and you will probably find out when you start riding the bike and your drivetrain feels horrible. And that's because you route the chain the wrong side of that little tab. We've all done it. We've got an inner and an outer. This is a connector pin, little missile shaped thing. Got a pointed end, so that makes it easier to push through the holes in the inner and the outer plate. Then we're going to use our chain tool to push it home and lock it in place. All right, so we're going to bring the two ends together, like that. Got our torpedo, push it through there. Now, you ain't going to do this by hand. Obviously we need a hold, but now look, the chain is held. So we'll get our chain tool, swing it all the way out so you've got more space, and then line it up on the tool like this, okay? And then we're gonna bring that pin in, and once again, we want really as sort of flat a connection as possible between the driving pin and the retaining chain pin. And then, oh, pops through, and then let's get it back on there. Let's keep going until...
There's a second pop.
Yeah, they'll be popping and pipping around a little bit, but that's just as the different shapes and the chamfers go through the different plates and pins and pops and twangs on the chain, technical terms. And then we're going to push it home until, well, go real gentle. Oh, there we go.
Right.
Don't go too far. If you go too far, you've messed it up. Let's take this off. So what we can see is that is a pretty flat surface there.
Yep.
much like the rest of them. That's good. And then we've got to snap the back end off. Pair of pliers. And then we've got it on the back of that torpedo, and then hopefully just snap it.
Boom.
Boom.
Just like that.
Easy. Okay, chuck that in the general waste. And then, let's find that pin, here we are. Okay, so here, oh look, and it's even fairly free moving, which is nice. Now sometimes when you join a chain like this, the link can be quite stiff. I can't demonstrate that because it's really smooth. If that's the case, then put your thumbs on either side of the link and then give the chain a little flex. And that'll just help loosen up that little linkage a bit, because obviously a stiff link going through your thread and stuff, a bit of a nightmare. Right, job done. If you're not using a pin, but you are using power links, quick links, that sort of thing, again, very simple process. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are arrows on these, right? And you need to get that right. With a flat top chain on transmission, it's quite obvious because the shape is flat at the top and curved on the bottom. But even with a normal one, on the Eagle ones, there's a bit more of a curve on the top, but that arrow really is what's crucial.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that arrow wants to be following the route of the chain through the drivetrain, okay? So down here, this is one half of the chain, that's gonna go there. This is going to go on the other side, like that. And then the way these work, look. Hit it together like that, and then we'll get our trusty link pliers, put it in there and there. Ooh. There and there, okay. And then you push them apart, and you watch, you'll be able to see this click in. Ready? There we go, just like that. Now, I'm in a workshop, I've got my link pliers. Let's say you're out on a trail, you've snapped your chain, you've managed to get another pair of quick links, and you've got your chain set up so it's like this, but you can't muscle it apart. Hack. Link them together, but we're not quite strong enough, even though I've been to the gym loads. So what we can do is then rotate the chain back through the system, this being an e-bike. It's going to be a bit grumbly over the chain ring because obviously the spacing's not right. Okay, what we can do is, with a bit of back brake, just do a little, there we are, locked in position, good to go. Okay. So, that's quite an extensive guide, probably longer than we planned, on how to set your chain length, why you're going to be doing it, the different processes for Shimano, for SRAM, older stuff, and for the new SRAM mechanical, how to chop your chain in bits, how to get your mic in the right position, and how to rejoin a chain. Hopefully that's helped. If not, and you've got any questions, put them down in the comments. We'll jump back in, try and answer them as best we can. In the description, we're going to put links to the SRAM chain guide length calculator tool. And we'll put links to the official PDFs from both SRAM and Shimano, so there's some proper official guides in there. If you enjoyed this video, drop us a comment, give us a like, subscribe, all that sort of jazz. And if you want to know more about tyres, click on our Idiot's Guide to Mountain Bike Tyres.